Welcome to the X Factor Real Estate Podcast, where we are simplifying the world of real estate one podcast at a time. I'm your host, Teri Hudson. Let's get into it. We're just going to beatbox in here the whole hour. We're actually not even saying anything about real estate. Okay, awesome. Welcome to the podcast. We're so excited you're here. I'm super stoked for this episode. Laren Nalder, a good friend of mine, and he's from Advanced Title. He is expert in all things title insurance. We're going to talk about some doozies today. A lot of people don't have any idea what title insurance is or why you even need it. I do transactions and they will see that there's going to be a title company and there's a charge for title insurance, and they'll say, what is this and do I need this? So I know this is like pretty basic from your standpoint, but let's just open it up to what title insurance is and why you need it. And then we're going to go into like the nitty gritty of trouble that we kind of run into.
Okay. Wow. Title insurance. In your standard real estate purchase contract, it calls for that, that it's one of the requirements of the transaction is that there is title insurance. There's two types of title insurance. There's owner's policies and lender's policies, and obviously those cover different things. For example, an owner's policy, the seller pays for that on the buyer's behalf, and that secures the buyer or insures the buyer against any liens or encumbrances previously on the title or the chain of title.
Right.
We do a search to make sure that the seller is the person that can sell the property, and we're ensuring that those liens have been satisfied and that there's nothing that could come back and somehow adversely affect the new buyer.
No loans still existing, no tax liens, mechanics liens, anything.
Encroachments.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. Yeah, 100%. And then the second form of title insurance is what's called a lender's title insurance policy. The buyer pays for that for their lender, and that's ensuring a lender in a first lien position in the event that they default on their mortgage and the bank needs to take it back, that they have the first lien on the property. Therefore, when they foreclose on it, they're insured usually to get their money back on their transaction.
Right. And if you had let's say cash buyer in a transaction, that goes away. So there's an owner's policy that the seller is paying for, guaranteeing that it's free and clear of, any encroachments on title. But there's no buyer's policy because there's no lender's policy, right? It's a
Correct.
Cash transaction. So,
Correct.
Okay, awesome. So super important and necessary to have in a transaction. And again, depending on who's paying for each policy, right? A buyer is paying for it if they're getting a loan on the property. A seller is paying for it in a transaction on their side of the owner's policy, right, in the transaction.
Correct.
So yeah, really important. Okay, so now that we've kind of got about title insurance, no, insurance, everybody loves insurance, right? But it's there for a reason, right? Protection. Right. You said in the very beginning to ensure, that the person selling the property is the person that can sell the property, guaranteeing all of those things. So let's jump into who actually can sell a property, who owns the house, and who has the ability to sell it. So if I'm going to sell a home, somebody says, hey, Teri, I want to sell my home. I always go to you immediately. And I say, hey, can you verify vesting on who is in fact the owner of the home? Because that's who I'm going to sign a listing agreement with. That's who's going to be able to sign all the paperwork and the contract, all of those things. So tell us how that happens and how you can find out who actually owns the house.
Very good. Most people have a good understanding of selling personal property. For example, like a car, and they get title to a car, and they're familiar with that. They're very familiar with that.
Right.
They're not necessarily familiar with real property, and it's a little more complicated idea when you start talking about transferring ownership in real property. And so as a title company, we're tasked with the records research. Now we have, every county is set up differently, which that's a whole different ball of wax, that every county in the state of Utah does their things differently. And so they have what's called a county recorder's office, and they're tasked with keeping track of who owns what property. Legally, who owns that property. And
right.
So part of what we do when we talk to you or we receive a contract is we'll do a search of the records to see what the county says, and we also go back to make sure that the county hasn't made any mistakes. And what we're looking for is what is called a chain of title. We're looking to see that seller A sold to seller B to seller C, and that all of those names came and transferred out correctly. And really, at the end of the day, what we get is what's called a vesting. And a vesting is how the legal ownership of real property is titled with the county recorder's office.
Right.
Okay? And, 95% of the time, that name is correct with what we're looking for, or, it's in a trust or something along those lines that we expect. Sometimes there's some outliers with that we have to clean up with. And, a lot of what we do is a lot of this behind the scenes work that, you've got your contract and you give it to us, and the title companies, we all try to work together to try to solve some of these problems that might occur. But usually, generally, if we have, 30, 40 days, to try to alleviate some of these problems, like I'm saying, it's only 5% of the time that we might probably have a problem.
Yeah, hiccups.
But usually we can overcome a lot of those situations and scenarios and clean up a title for someone. But usually that's what it is it's just a search of what the county recorder has listed in their records as far as who owns the property, what liens there are. And that's what we put together as a report that reflects what is in the public record.
Right. So yeah, I get somebody who says, Teri, can you help me sell my home? I go to you before I've even met with them and walked their home. I get their address. I send it to you and say, hey, can you do, a preliminary title report on this and kind of see what's on here? I will show up to that listing appointment and I will say to them, does this look correct? This is what is showing up on your title. And sometimes they're surprised, right? They didn't know that a spouse had pulled a home equity line of credit on there, or that there was a mechanic's lien on there. So when you say in the beginning, when you talked about, a lender's policy of being first position, it does go like that on a totem pole, right? You have a mortgage on a house, and a first mortgage is in first position to get paid off, unless what trumps a mortgage? Taxes, right? A tax lien.
Yeah, I mean, well, when we do a closing, we have to make sure that the taxes are paid.
Yeah.
Or accounted for, so that they will be paid, so that then they would be
right
in a subsequent lien position.
Right.
So Utah is what we call a rush to record state. So whatever records first becomes the lien priority position.
Okay. So a mortgage, and then maybe a second mortgage,
sure,
taxes, whatever it happens to be.
Judgment.
Yes, a judgment. So if somebody gets sued and there's a judgment ordered, right, and then it goes against, or a mechanic's lien. How does a mechanic put a mechanic's lien on somebody's property?
Okay, well, now we're getting a little into the nitty-gritty.
I know, I told you the nitty-gritty. Well, in simplified terms, right?
Well,
I want everybody to hear this and say, like, wait, is that possible? If I don't pay my contractor, is it possible that they then lien my property? Yes, it is possible.
100%. Now,
for a reason, right?
The law is very specific about who can lien properties, okay? I hear it all the time. People call me on the phone and say, hey, I want to lien this person's property because they owe me money, okay? It's not the right way to handle things.
Right.
That's what the court systems are for, and the law is very specific about who can lien a property. So what that's reserved for is for people that have improved the property, like what you're describing. A general contractor comes out,
finishes a basement.
That person is totally within their right to lien the property if they haven't been paid.
Right.
And they can't just lien the property and hold it hostage. They have to, once they've liened the property, they have to continue that on with what's called a lis pendens, which is a court-ordered action wherein they're trying to get the property owner to pay or negotiate the payment and get it done and taken care of. You can't just lien a property and
drop communication.
Correct.
Right.
You have to continue to go forward. And a mechanic's lien falls under what we call an involuntary lien situation, which that would be the contractor liening the property, whereas like a deed of trust is the homeowner signed for that deed of trust. They willingly lien their property.
Right.
So there's voluntary and involuntary. So the involuntary lien, like we're describing this mechanic's lien, falls under those special rules, and you have to keep very tight
protocol
fit those windows
Yeah.
in order to maintain and do what's called perfecting that lien.
Right.
If someone owes you money and you just go out and lien their property, that opens you up to some serious repercussions as far as what they can sue you back for.
Right. And could you imagine just people leaning other people's
They do.
properties? I
They
know.
do.
It's wild. This is why you do a title search, though.
Correct.
This is why you want to make sure that everybody knows before they sell their house or before they buy someone else's house what is on there. And if you're buying a house and you get a title report and it says, hey, there's 12 liens on this property, you're going to verify that all of those things are going to be taken care of, right? Before
100%.
it's
100%.
Yeah. So those things, when they close on the house, out of the proceeds, those liens get taken care of, right, from the title company directly. And then when all liens have been satisfied, then the home can fund and record.
100%.
So really important to do. Okay. So vesting, we find out who owns the house. Okay. So how about this is a big question I get a lot in real estate from people. If a wife owns the house on vesting, but the husband's name is not on title, is the husband privy to, let's say, half the proceeds of the house? Now, I know every situation is different and depends, right? If it's divorce, if it's death, if it's all these things, right? Different things happen either through probate or divorce court or whatever it may be. And we can kind of go into some of those things too. But in general, whoever owns the house is whoever is on title.
So Utah is what they call not a community property law state, which that's very rare from what I understand the rest of the United States works with. In other states, if one spouse buys the property, then when they go to sell, both spouses have to sell the property. Utah is not a community property law state, and there's some reasons for that might involve polygamy, but
different
that's
podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
100%.
A different
but
podcast.
that's really the root of it. And so, but keep in mind that marriage is a legal binding contract. If you are going through a divorce, a judge can lien an equitable lien in the property because you are technically sharing all your assets. And so, as far as title is
depending
concerned,
on when that home was purchased, right? Was it
Correct.
purchased before the marriage, during the marriage, all those things?
and that's up to a judge to decide
Right.
at that point in the ballgame. But as far as I'm concerned, if I look at the vesting, which is how the property is titled, and it says wife's name's on the title, and I have a contract that says that wife's selling the property to whoever, I do not need the husband's permission, signature, or anything in order to effect that sale.
Right.
Now, if it's under a divorce, we're going to check to see what the judge has ordered in that case. And if he's ordered something, then obviously we'll follow that. But as far as if there's no divorce involved and it's just one person's name, that's all we're dealing with.
Right. Right.
So,
Okay. How about in a death situation? So this happens a lot. And we kind of joke
more
about
often than not.
we kind of joke about this, right? Because I am surprised at the amount of people who are not aware of how much signing power they have or don't have based on a piece of paper that they have, right? I have a lot of people who will say, hey, I'm trying to sell my dad's property. And I say, okay, where's dad? Well, dad's in a home. Okay. Do you, is he, does he have his wits about him? Is he not? Is he in there because of an injury, or is he there because he doesn't, maybe it's a dementia, Alzheimer's situation and he doesn't know what is happening and this person has a power of attorney. Okay. In that case, right, if we can show this person has a power of attorney for the dad that's now in a home and the dad is not mentally capable of signing and doing all of these things, right? Can that person who has power of attorney sign for the dad to sell the home?
So let's back this up just a little bit here, okay?
Okay.
The power of attorneys that you generally get from people are not specific enough for us as in the title world generally for us to use to sell a property. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars involved. And our underwriters are very specific about they want that entity, the dad who's in the home, that he understands that he's granting that person the authority to sell their house.
Right.
And so that kind of treads a little bit sometimes on some people's toes because they think they've done what they've needed to do to take care of their parent.
And there's a little more red tape.
And there's usually a little bit more to it. We need a little bit more teeth in that in order to feel comfortable that that's what's happening. So understand in our end of the world, we err on the side of protecting dad who's in the home.
As you should.
Than we do about son who may be doing everything right to try to help dad. But we're going to err on the side that we make sure that dad knows what is happening and why that's happening.
Right.
Now, how many times have I personally gone to notarize someone that was not mentally with it? Probably less than 10 and 30 years that someone's actually pushed me to go and try to get me to get someone to sign a power of attorney to give them power of attorney over, their property. Probably less than 10. People just understand that that's not good. And, I show up and it's pretty apparent. I mean, I ask a couple of questions like, how do you feel about the president? And usually whoever it is, they have a very strong opinion. Not that I care. I just want to see that you have
an opinion. Right.
And, that's usually a very good way for me to determine whether or not you know what's going on in the world.
Right.
And you understand what's happening here. And so, like I said, less than probably 10% of the time I have that problem. Now, let's say that they have a power of attorney that does work, okay? And what usually that involves is it says the name of the vesting, it says the property address, it gives a tax ID number and a legal description. And it says that this person has the authority to sell or buy or refinance this property. And it says it right there, this property specifically. Usually what you're going to have is what's called a general durable power of attorney that's just very general. It's going to say
very vague.
Very vague, very general. But if it specifies this property, this address, he has this authority, great. We're happy to use those things.
If it's a general power of attorney and someone wants to sell the home, you then say, hey, I need something more specific.
Correct.
Otherwise, dad is the one who's going to have to sign this.
Correct. And we're trying to avoid, future problems. Like, let's say it's your sister now that finds out that you've sold dad's property and she puts her arm up in the air and says, dad didn't know what he was signing when he signed it. We're just trying to help everybody,
right.
Avoid those
future issues.
Those future issues. And we're trying to make sure that the power of attorney is specific enough that it covers that item specifically, that that person has the authority to sell the property.
Right.
So what a lot of times we'll run into too is people will say, okay, well, like I'll have a contract or I'll have a vesting that says Verla is the owner. And I will go to closing and I'll walk in the door and there'll be some 20-year-old girl sitting there.
And she doesn't look like a Verla.
There's no way. and I'll say, hi. So I'm like, hey, and I'll start. I'll say, can I get your ID? And I'll get it and it'll say Christy or, Tammy or something like that. And I'll go, oh, cool. So where's Verla? And they'll say, oh, Verla died 8 years ago. Okay, there's no policing agency that goes out and says, oh, this person's dead. You've got to do something with the property. You've got to do something with the title.
Right.
So this is the first time that you're dealing with this. So they come to closing, and I've got Christy sitting in front of me, supposed to sign for Verla, and I'll say, okay, well, what are we working with here? And they'll say, well, I've got a power of attorney. Okay. Now, power of attorneys expire when the person dies.
Right.
And so now I'm the police, and everybody hates me because now I'm the person that says you can't sell this property because you do not have the authority.
And you're at a closing table where a buyer thinks they're buying a house that 100%. Day, and that house cannot legally be sold 100%. By someone who has a power of attorney for someone who is dead.
Can't work.
Yeah.
Doesn't work, can't work.
Yeah.
And there's really nothing I can do about it.
Right. And their agent should know that. So that's an education piece that an agent needs to know when they have a listing agreement being signed, who is on title, who has the power to sign for that person. And if it is a power of attorney and the person is deceased, that doesn't fly.
Right.
So yeah, that's an important piece that needs to be caught before they get to your closing table.
We'll look at the purchase contract and it'll say Verla, and oftentimes they're signed digitally. And it'll say Verla signed it.
Right.
And so we don't have any interaction with the people prior to when they usually come and sit down at my closing table. And so I don't know. And so that's the first time that I go, oh, wait a minute, we got a problem. Like,
what's up, Verla?
Wait a minute, what's going on? I chose my grandmother's name, so
I love it.
Should be good.
I love it. Yeah. So, yeah. And at that point, now, I mean, there's a breach of contract, right? And you got to,
Technically, there is, because the person that signed that contract does not have the authority to do it.
right.
So yes.
Yeah.
that's
So now we have
technically-
an issue, and that can't be sold. Okay. So that happens actually a lot, where people want to sell a home for someone who's passed. They had a power of attorney that's no longer valid because the person's not alive anymore. So what they don't realize is that because that home was not in a trust, it then needs to go
probate.
to probate. So probate can take a short amount of time, or it can take a long time, right? But that process needs to happen before that home gets listed, because then during that probate period of time, the judge then says this person has the ability to sign to sell this home, and that's what you need.
So there's a lot more to probate than just, a time period kind
Right.
of thing. There's you have to look at the descendants. They each all need to approve who it is that they're determining is going to be the person that can sign for the deceased. They usually will post it with the whatever newspaper to give lien holders an opportunity, like mechanics liens kind of people, an opportunity to say, hey, before he died, he had me put in a fence and I didn't know how to get a hold of him because he died. I don't know what to do here, So there's a little bit of time that has to go into that. And it's certainly not something that can happen overnight. You cannot do a probate in 1 day, 2 days. I mean, the fastest I've seen it done is about a month.
Right.
And that's if you've got an attorney that is on it and is
Yeah.
motivated, and it's not going to be cheap, And I would always recommend a couple of things. Number one, if you own property, you need a trust. You just do it. You just never know. You can be driving down the street doing everything right, and somebody can hit you, and that could be it. And then you leave a whole world of hurt for people, and especially
hurt and complication, right? So now they're
complication and
grieving
cost.
and trying to figure out
correct.
how to move forward.
And I would always, everybody knows a real estate professional. Obviously, Teri's one of the best, and so give her a call. But she can help talk to you
Thank you
about
for the shout out,
what property that you have, and she knows some people that she could direct you to help you get a trust. But I would always recommend that you have those things put in place. And because of power of attorney, a will, people tell me that too all the time. Oh, well, I've got a will. I was named their executor, so I can sell their stuff. That only works on personal property. So
yeah, it still has to go through probate.
100%.
And then
100%.
that will can be shown, sure, to the court and say this is what he or she left.
Correct.
But you're not avoiding probate by having a will.
No,
So
not at all. Someone has to have legal authority to sign.
right.
And you can't, with a will, show up at my title company and say, here's the will, I'm signing for Verla. It just doesn't work like that. You get, at the end of probate, you get what's called letters of testamentary, which the judge signs that says that this person is now the personal representative of the estate of Verla.
Right.
And so with that document, now you can come to me and you can sign on behalf of Verla because you've been given legal authority to do so by a judge.
Right.
And that's the end of the road, is the letters of testamentary.
Yeah. So if it does go to probate, that you guys ask for that.
100%.
If the home is in a trust, then the trust says Laren is trustee of whatever, and you're going to then ask for a copy of the trust so that you
Correct.
can verify that, right?
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. So when we talk about vesting, legal ownership of a property, once you deed a property from your personal name into the name of a trust, okay, a trust survives your death.
Right.
And so your ownership of that property, or the trust's ownership, survives your death.
Right.
And so there'll be terms and provisions in the trust that say, that Verla was the trustee of the Verla Trust. But upon her death, Laren became the successor trustee of the Verla Trust, in which case, when you come to me and it's vested in the name of the trust and we're trying to sell it now, I say, oh, Verla's dead. Cool. Sorry, not cool, but can I get a copy of the death certificate? And I take the death certificate and we do what's called an affidavit. So we use this affidavit to explain to the county recorder, this is why Verla is not signing this document. Verla, as the trustee of the trust, is dead, as evidenced by the death certificate. Laren is now the successor trustee of the trust. And so then the county goes, oh, that makes sense. That follows my chain. Now we can go ahead, and when Laren, now as the successor trustee of the trust, signs the deed, we transfer that title to the new person. The chain works. It all fits out. It all fits. It all works.
Right. Right. The steps have been taken, and every box is checked.
Correct.
Yeah. And we're not recording any real property unless all of those boxes are checked. Yeah.
Correct. The county, like I said, there's no real governing board over the counties, and so they all operate a little bit differently. But for the most part, they're looking for some pretty specific things. It's got to be signed. It's got to be notarized. It's got to have a legal description. It's got to have a tax ID number. Those are the 4 things that you need to record a document. So all the counties are supposed to take whatever document you present them if it has those 4 things. Okay. Now they're not a policing agency. They're not going to look at what you're recording to determine whether or not it's legal or it's not, but they're going to look at it and decide whether or not that completes the requirement to pass title from one person to another.
Right.
Okay. So you could take anything you want down. Like we've done this before as a practice. We took a photocopy of a hand and we recorded it on one of our employees' property, and we called it a notice of intent to high five.
Amazing.
And they didn't believe us that the county would take it, and they have to. They absolutely have to take the
because it had those
4 things.
Yeah.
Correct. Now whether or not that transfers title to anyone, obviously that doesn't. But
when that employee sells their house,
and they have, and so it's floating out there. I mean, it's there, but
Amazing.
by point of record, I mean, the county has to take it if it fits those parameters. And so as title company, we have to, obviously we're looking to make sure that A to B, B to C, C to D, D to F, those kind of things all kind of follow, and they make sense.
Right.
And obviously if it makes sense, it makes sense. Now, the county is very specific. Like if it was Verla J and we just have Verla's name, they're not going to pass title. If it says Verla J is the owner, we have to use Verla J. We can't make something else up. It has to be exact. Correct.
Yeah. Which all of these things are so stringent because it's a big deal transferring
100%.
Real property.
100%.
You need to know you own it outright. Nobody else has a right to it. And I mean, these are big purchases.
100%.
People are spending hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars on real estate. And could you imagine if it was, not checking all the boxes and people were just recording anyway?
Right.
It'd be a nightmare.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Which, speaking of nightmares, there's been a few of those, right? Over your days in title.
100%.
There's been a few times, I know in my own experience, where we've gotten a title report and it shows either the wrong name or there's something on it, and we have gone back, right? And you've said, let me figure out why this was recorded this way, and something was recorded incorrectly, right?
Correct.
I mean, it happens.
100%.
So tell me, do you have like 1 or 2 off the top of your head that you love to reference?
A lot
in
of
your experience?
Unfortunately, what we see oftentimes is like, let's say Verla owns the property and she wants to deed it to her trust. So she goes to her attorney, and her attorney then says, instead of saying Verla J, she says Verla Johnson. Okay. And so the property was vested, or the name showed Verla J, J-A-Y, and instead they put Verla Johnson because, like, let's say that was her maiden name. Okay.
Okay.
Well, now the county looks at that, and the county's not going to fight an attorney because they're going to figure the attorney knows what they're doing. They're just going to add it to it. So now what you're going to have
Isn't that interesting?
It is extremely interesting. But therein again, it's all about who they trust and what the requirements are for the county. So what you'll end up with is now you've got half the property owned by Verla J, and then the other half of the property in Verla Johnson's trust. And so now Verla J thinks she's done what she needed to do, but that's only happened for half of the trust, and so you get down now, Verla dies. I got Christine sitting in my office. What do we do?
Right.
Okay. And so then that becomes, and obviously the more time we have to work with something, the easier it is for us to, overcome some of these scenarios. And to be honest with you, we're human too. All title companies are. We can make mistakes just as easy as anyone else does. But what I found is in the industry, we're all interested in helping each other get the job done and, help people buy real estate. I've never ran into a title company that's been like, nope, we're not helping you, so.
Yeah. Yeah. You all
we
want the deal to close.
Yeah, we call them on the phone and say, hey, look, you did a deed for Verla Johnson. I needed it in Verla J's name. And usually they'll go, oh, let me look at this, and they're willing to help. Whether or not they can or they can't, that's a different scenario. But
Right.
I mean, that's kind of one of the big deals that we see often is people have thought they've sold their property, but for whatever misprint, typo, technicality, the property didn't transfer over because of that. Like I said, it's got to match, and it just didn't match for whatever reason. And so now we're jumping back decades trying to help track down somebody to have them sign a piece of paper to do what they thought they'd already done. And a lot of times they're not real happy about that, but for the most part they understand, and we've had some good luck with that in the past. I mean, just some of the weird things that you run into. Divorce scenarios often are a pain. They're always there's a lot of money involved. People get emotional about that kind of thing, and if you run into some of those little typos that we're discussing in a divorce situation, that's a little bit more difficult. Like I said, people are a little bit more sensitive because of that scenario. They think people are taking advantage of somebody or something, and if you're working with the right people, they have the right temperament, it makes a big difference in
For
how
sure.
you get things
Huge difference. And I think one of the biggest issues in transactions with divorce is they can't very easily remove the emotion, right?
Right.
And so you have this team of real estate professionals, title, the realtor, a lender, or whoever it is, whether you're buying, selling, whatever. And given the laws of Utah, if it is vested in either the husband's or the wife's name, that's who we're dealing with unless court ordered otherwise.
Correct.
But a lot of times, the ex-wife, the ex-husband, they want to be treated equally in the transaction for, signing papers and all of those things.
Or they want to know how much it got sold for.
Or they want to know all of the details, what's it under contract for. And I can't legally share that information
Correct.
with you if you are not the client.
Correct.
So if you're not on title and I don't have a court order that says I have to share all information with you and that you are privy to this information and have to sign, I legally cannot give you that information. And you get people all the time that call you at the title company, want to know what it closed for, or XYZ question, and you legally can't tell them, and people don't understand that. So it's really important to know who owns the house, who has rights to sign for the house, all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say we're HIPAA, but we definitely have to abide by a privacy policy. And, we always need to, in my title company, we do this all the time. We have these continuing education classes where we talk about, who is authorized to get this information? How are they involved with the transaction? What does that look like? What are they asking for? Those kind of scenarios. And, we run into those problems frequently, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's the thousands of dollars. I mean, and it's, we obviously we want to help get the deal done, but by the same token, we're not going to violate any laws for anyone to make that happen.
For sure.
100%.
Okay. Did you think of a story?
Did I think of a story? Man, give me a minute while we talk about something else, and I can come up with a good one for you.
So, just for everybody listening, obviously, super important to get your home in a trust if it's not already. And a lot of times people think we should get this home in a trust prior to my elderly parents passing. But as we know, things happen all the time. People get sick, there's accidents, whatever. People die every day for unexpected reasons. That process is that person just needs to go to an attorney that does estate planning, that puts together trusts, right? They pay a fee, the attorney puts that together, and then that individual or that couple that owns the home, whoever owns the home, no longer owns the home. The trust owns the home. And there's a couple of reasons why actually even prior to death, they should have their home in a trust, right? Protection wise, if someone trips and falls on your property, or you get in a car accident, you know, as Laren, and somebody wants to sue Laren and your home is in a trust, they can't go after your home. It's protected in the trust as easily as they could go after it as an individual asset, right?
100%. They could lien any beneficial interest that I might have in the property. And so, you know, if you talk to your legal professional and attorney about how to avoid some of those things, they can draft it up the way that you're wanting it to. So.
Right. So, I mean, there's a lot of benefits of doing it, and there's a lot of people who don't want to spend the money on trust.
For sure.
But
so now if I can give you a little tip for the day.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen another tip. If you've seen any of those television commercials about title lock.
Yes.
Have you seen that?
I was going to ask you about this also.
So
yes.
It's kind of like the LifeLock thing that they have, and they advertise this, and I think it's Newt Gingrich that's the spokesperson for them, that, you know, people can go out and they can steal your property and they can take hundreds of thousands of dollars. Listen, it's not that easy.
Right.
Okay. The amount of people that know how to do what I do is very, very few. Even you as a real estate professional, as a real estate agent, could not draft a warranty deed to do it. That you might be able to kind of try to piece it together a little bit, but to do it the right way and
take all the steps we just talked about. Yeah.
And do it right and make it work to where the county's going to honor it. The chances of the average person doing that is zero. Like it's just not going to happen. Now, like I said, the county does have to record documents regardless if it has those 4 things that we talked about in there. And so they kind of prey on fear. It's one of those, like my mom called me on the phone freaking out. Oh no, I need to protect my property, And I'm like, Mom, it doesn't work like that. Now, there's a free service that Salt Lake County and Utah County both offer. It's called Property Watch. We can probably get a link that you can put on whatever this is.
I'll put a link in the description.
It's a free service that both the counties offer to the county, the residents of the county. You go onto this website, you put in the address and your email address, and now anytime something records with the county recorder in relationship to that property, you'll get an email. And so it actually works as the same thing as this service that you're paying money for.
But
you'll get an alert, but it's free, and it comes from the county. So it's not from me, it's not from you, it's from Salt Lake County. We'll say, hey, here's an email, this recorded on your property. And and you might get something like that, and if you sign up for it and something hits your email and you don't know what it is, call your real estate professional.
That's right.
She can help you out, but I would highly it's a free service. There's no reason why everyone doesn't sign up for this at all. I mean, it's good to know. It's just good to get.
Watch.
Property Watch. Yep. If you Googled it, Salt Lake County Property Watch or Utah County Property Watch, it's going to take you right to that link, and you can sign up. It literally takes 30 seconds, and boom, you're in the system, and you'll get an email for it. So
for sure, do that. I'll put the link in the description.
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
100%.
Awesome. Did you think of your story?
So what? Tell me what kind of story you want to hear. I've probably had one for every. I
think. Like, how about? I don't know. Like, I really want something juicy, like a horror story of title that you just kind of were racking your brain thinking, how did this happen?
So I've got a great one for you here.
Okay.
That kind of rolls down this whole kind of some weird things. And so I had a situation where I was working with a builder, and they had an agent that had found the property for this builder to build the property. And they do these captured business arrangements where, the builder is going to list with this agent so that they can get the commission on it.
Right.
And then they're going to dictate which title company they use, because as the owners, they're the ones selling the property, they can dictate who the seller side goes to.
Right.
And so we get going through this whole complex. We've done, 50, 60 transactions in this one complex. And we get down to the end. And this agent feels like that they are deserved one of these units in the end. Okay. Themselves. And
interesting.
At the end of this, it's like, okay, but that has nothing to do with what's under contract and what's selling. And so what happened is that this agent then dictated and moved the closing to another title company. And it said right in the closing, or in the purchase contract, that they were going to close with us. And so I called him on the phone and I said, what's going on? I mean, I'd done 50 transactions with this guy at this
Yeah.
point. He goes, well, this builder owes me money. And I said, hey, look, that may be or may not be true, but you got to work that out outside of this transaction. You cannot involve this in this transaction. And so we got him to move it back to us for the closing. And I get a phone call from an attorney for this agent. And this attorney says to me, you have to hold those proceeds. And I said, get me a court order and I'm happy to hold those. But I'm like, until that happens, number one, I can't tell you how much it's sold for, and I can't really even listen to what you're telling me.
Right.
I can't take instructions from a third party on how I'm going to disperse.
Get me something in writing.
I need something with some meat on it. I'm like, I understand the situation. I fully get what you guys are coming from, but I can't do that just because you tell me to do that. So he got an emergency hearing with the judge, and the judge denied his claim to hold the money. Now that ended up in court, and they ended up settling. But you can't hold a transaction hostage. You can't bring in other things that you may or may not feel are party to money.
Right.
You know what I mean? And people get really wrapped up into that sometimes, and they lose focus as to this is what the contract says.
Yeah.
And this is what it does. Now I don't know. Like we were messing around with AI today. And we took a whole title commitment and dumped it into AI and said, give us a verbal summary of what this says. And you would be amazed at what it threw out.
Really?
It was actually really cool. And we've done that with contracts as well, where throw all of this into AI and say, give me a brief summary. And and it spits it out in plain language. I mean, it was really pretty cool what happened.
Yeah.
So, but people get weird about money, and it just blows my mind that they can't separate themselves. They get emotion. That emotion gets involved in it, and they really get panicked over some of these things, and that can affect people in the end because here's this buyer innocently didn't even know what was going on, and it about threw the train off the tracks because this agent decided that they were trying to hold the transaction hostage. So.
Yeah, and you can't do that. There's a reason why you have that process that you have to follow. Could you imagine if somebody could just say, hey, hold this up? Again, back to the divorce situation, the amount of ex-wives or ex-husbands that would want to put a wrench in a transaction, for one reason or another. Siblings, a lot of times, I've dealt with siblings that don't have signing rights for, they're not a trustee. They don't have the power of attorney to sell. They want to know exactly what's going on. I'm getting a phone call and they're not the client. I don't have the legal right to share that information with them. And I have to work with the person that has that legal right, as do you, right? So really important. And again, just stresses, I think, the importance of getting all of those things lined up if you can prior to these things happen. Obviously, I've been divorced. You don't get married planning on being divorced, so you don't know, you do have things that you have to navigate through, as it comes.
And there's a flip side to that too. Sometimes people will own a property with their spouse and not realize that the spouse is on there and put a deal under contract, and they'll come to closing and I'll say, okay, cool, where's Barbara? And they're like, well, no, Barbara's not on this. And I'm like,
actually
she is. And then that opens this whole different, can of worms. So, I've been doing this since the late 1900s. I've seen every type of scenario come up that you can imagine. And for every exception one way, there's been an exception the opposite way when it comes to that. So each situation is different. And obviously I would encourage the working relationship that agents have with title insurance companies to whatever you've got going on, take a minute, talk to your title people about what they see and how they see it. And because it'll just help you avoid problems in the end.
How many times have I sat at your desk and just said, Laren, work this out with me.
100%.
Tell me.
Tell
me how this goes. This guy's on my speed dial. I just call him about everything.
And by the same token, how many times have I said, if you've got a question, if you see this, let's talk about it. Let's look at it together. So obviously you want to look like you know everything there is to know about a property, and I want to help you look good in that area.
Right.
And, I've even fielded phone calls from you when it was another title company.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't
No, you're
understand
amazing.
what they said, or you didn't know what to ask or how to ask it. And it boils down to that comfort level. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to get that job done.
Right.
And we want to help you avoid those same pitfalls that, you know, we can see that you might run into if it comes up. I'm dealing with a situation right now where I'm on the buyer's side of a raw land transaction. And so I was working with the lender, doing the lender's policy. I had been in contact with the seller's title company. And 2 days before closing, the agent calls me on the phone and says, we want to move and have you be the seller's title company as well. Now, that throws up a major red flag, obviously, because from our standpoint, it's like, well, why weren't you getting along with this person? What's going on?
Right.
And we looked at the situation. There's two lis pendences pending on the property, so 2 court proceedings happening with the property. And usually, when something like that's going on, it's that title company has told them no, and they don't want to hear no, and so now they want to see what I'm going to say.
Right.
So in the 4 days now that I've had the transaction, I've gotten one of the lis pendences removed, and I got underwriting exception for the other one, and we're closing. So
Nice.
we had it 4 days, and I got it fixed, but I have a little bit more experience, and I can see some of these things that maybe somebody can't. And
Right.
you know, I know who to call and what to say. Some of these things that maybe some of these other people don't. And you know, like I said, we're all trying to get the same job done, but it is a red flag when I get a seller's end of a deal.
Emergency switchover.
Emergency switchover, correct.
You are very good at what you do, and I'm not blowing smoke because you happen to be on the podcast. I have worked with a lot of title companies, because you don't always get to choose the title company, right? Sometimes if I get to choose the title company, I know exactly.
Let's be clear about that. So the seller side can choose. So we in Utah, we can split. We can have a split closing, it's called. So the seller can sign at one title company and the buyer can sign at another title company.
Correct.
And by law, the seller, since they're paying for the owner's policy, they can choose who that is. And since the buyer's paying for a lender's policy, they can choose who that is.
Correct.
So oftentimes it's a split.
Unless if it's a cash deal,
cash deal.
right? A cash deal like we talked about in the beginning, there's no lender's policy. And so the only title insurance policy being paid for is an owner's policy by the seller. So by default, the seller chooses the title company, one title company, right?
Correct.
So in that case, when I have represented a cash buyer for a property, we have had to use the seller's choice in title company. And, you know, that's happened a handful of times. And I'm not saying that other title companies are not good. I know there are a handful of really good title companies out there. But I have yet to work with a title company that has not only your speed and customer service abilities, but also your thorough understanding of knowledge of all of those things of how to solve a problem, right? Almost any problem can be solved. It's how do we solve the problem, right? So you're very, very good at that. And I appreciate that. I also appreciate that even when I call you at sometimes outside of business hours, you answer the phone. But I've had agents, I'm a principal broker, right? I have agents that do contracts, and there have been times where I get a call in an evening and one of my agents is saying, hey, this is the situation. And I have said to one of my agents, do not go under contract with that. It has not gone through probate. You do not know that they have the right to sign. Do not do that, because if as a seller, they go under contract and they cannot perform under what they have agreed to, then now they're in breach of contract, right? And that seller is now going to have to pay at least the earnest money, if not more, liquidated damages. Who knows how that's going to work out, right? So our job as agents is to protect our clients. And last week, actually, in our tax strategy podcast, Sean Finnegan talked about like the team, right? And I definitely appreciate you being on that team where it feels like to get from point A to point Z in a real estate transaction, you need a good team, and you're solidly welcome on my team any day.
Well, thank you.
Okay, what else do you feel like we've missed or should talk about as far as title? So trust's super important, whether you're planning on having somebody pass in the near future or not. Power of attorney, if you need a power of attorney signed, it needs to be before the power of attorney. Correct me if I'm wrong. You really should get a power of attorney, a specific power of attorney signed prior to the need for the power of attorney.
100%.
Right?
100%.
So, let's say, for example, you have a college age kid. That college age kid is above 18. They go into the hospital. They don't give me, as a parent, information, right?
Correct.
That person is an adult.
Right.
So let's say, as a parent, you are wanting some sort of medical access to medical information in an emergency situation. That would be a very specific power of attorney. In the case of my adult child, whatever, right? And that's what it would say. So if you have a situation where you have an aging parent, and there's no trust yet, I say yet because they should get one, right?
100%.
At what point would you recommend that they say, I'm going to get a power of attorney for my aging mother or aging father or aging spouse, and that specific power of attorney would say, whatever, in the case of XYZ.
Incapacitation.
Yeah.
Mental. Usually it's a mental disability kind of thing. Keep in mind that power of attorneys are only valid if they have an expiration date.
Right.
And the reason why the courts and title companies want to see that is they want to be sure that power of attorney that was granted to the person continues, like that it gets re-upped. And that's ultimately
intentionally
re-upped. Right. Yeah. So that they can't say that, well, I had power of attorney for him 6 years ago. Well, in 6 years is a lot of time.
And a lot of things
feelings can change really quick on that kind of a thing. And so usually I would recommend no more than 6 months on a power of attorney, just because of that exact scenario. They can be contested in court. That's where a trust can come into effect that makes, that is longer than that and carries that power to sign for the property in the event someone dies or is incapacitated, that a power of attorney wouldn't cover because of that time limitation, if that makes sense.
So you're in the process of getting a trust put together. That hasn't happened yet. So in the meantime, hey, mom and dad, let's sign a temporary power of attorney that in case something in the next 6 months happens while we're putting together this trust for the family, you are granting this person the ability in the case that you are not capable.
So unfortunately, in my experience, what I see is we find out mom or dad's got cancer, and now magically we're like, we need to do something about this, about their assets, and do some of this planning that we've put off for decades now. They're 80, 90 years old. Grandma's got cancer, and now she's got 3 weeks to live. What do we do?
Right.
Okay. You should be able to find an attorney that can draft up a trust for you
pretty quickly
in that scenario. Like I said, a power of attorney probably isn't going to give you what you need post-mortem that you want to carry with that. Additionally, there's some tax ramifications that I would recommend that you talk to a tax professional and an attorney that can help you have a step up in basis points, so that when they do sell the property and if they're taking money out of it, what those tax implications look like. I'm not a tax professional. I don't.
Right.
But I will always recommend that you go and talk to somebody about those kind of things, because yes, I can help you transfer the title 100%. She's 90 years old and you need to get it out of her name into your name. We can do a deed for that.
But it looks different on taxes.
And taxes are going to be a different thing. And I'm not a professional when it comes to that. But if you need me to help get it transferred out, 100% I can do that for you.
Right.
So, or get it into the name of a trust, 100% I can do that for you.
Right.
So, and like I said, Teri's got people we can recommend you to. But I would, if you are in, I wouldn't say your first home, but your family home that you were raising your family in, or post that, I would recommend a trust from there forward. First home, probably not. But after that, I would definitely recommend it. And a trust can evolve. It can get bigger. It can be amended. It can change, for how your life circumstances change.
Right.
If you don't want that person to be the trustee anymore, you can change that. You can change the name or the property that it is over, that it manages, or is
right. It's
in
not
charge
permanent.
of. So
Most
it's not
trusts are not permanent.
correct. So it can modify, and it can change as your wills and desires change, or your properties change as you go forward. So like I said, probably not your first home, but your family home, and therefore I would recommend a trust.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well,
Wow.
You're amazing. Thank you so much.
That went quicker than
I know, right? Look at that. Time flies when you're having fun.
I know, right?
So thanks for being here. I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and hopefully it was helpful. I will put that property watch link for you to protect your title in the description. Also, Laren's and my contact information will be in the description. So reach out to us if we can help you with anything. And thanks for listening. Cool, yeah?
Yeah, awesome.
You're awesome. We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the X Factor Real Estate Podcast. Thanks so much for being here and listening. It's been a pleasure making this podcast for you. And as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Drop something in the chat. Let us know what you're interested in hearing about in the real estate world. I'm Teri Hudson, and I hope you join us for our next episode.